Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin Lee. I'm the host for today's event. Our honored guest today is the Secretary General of United Nations, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. I understand you came straight here from the airport, and this is the first event you attend during this trip. And Ban Ki-moon is the 8th UN Secretary General, and his priorities has been mobilizing the world leaders to solve a range of new global challenges, including climate change, economic upheaval, or food and water quality, those sort of things. And he's also thought to be a bridge builder and to give voice to the poorest and most underprivileged people, and also to strengthen United Nations as an organization. Recently, I understand his priority has been more towards the sustainable growth, the global goals for sustainable development. That's basically the blueprint for the world over the next 15 years. So, Secretary General, welcome back to China again.
Thank you, Mr. Robin Lee. 大家好，我是联合国秘书长班主任。
That's great.
I'm very happy to visit China again. This is my 9th visit to China.
Yeah.
In my 9th year as the Secretary General of the United Nations.
That's like once per year.
回到中国很高兴。
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking forward to participating in a very important ceremony commemorating the end of Second World War, 70th anniversary. And it also coincides with the founding of the United Nations, 70th anniversary.
Right.
And I'm here to express my deep respect for all the contributions that China has been making for world peace and security.
Right.
The sacrifice, all these atrocities caused upon the Chinese people, and their contribution and their bravery to restore their freedom and security is well recognized by the world people.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to work together with the Chinese government and people. China has been making a tremendous development and changing a phenomenal way. Now, it's not only changing, China has become an indispensable member state of the United Nations. Without Chinese participation, it's very difficult to think that we can do our global things properly. Therefore, I'm looking forward to my meeting with the President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Keqiang, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi,
Yeah.
and the Vice Premier Liu Yandong, many others leaders during my brief stay. And China has been making a great contribution to not only peace and security, but also development. The United Nations is now working to adopt the Sustainable Development Agenda, aiming 2030, another 15 years. China has been making a great contribution to implementation of Millennium Development Goals. And I'd like to highly commend and congratulate Chinese government and people for successful implementation of almost all the 8 goals. Now we are looking to to having 17 Sustainable Development Goals covering all aspects of human life and nature. Environmental sustainability, economic and social sustainability, including peaceful society, good governance, and rule of law. In there, I count on strong engagement and leadership of China. China also has been providing peacekeeping operations. We really appreciate. In all this, I'm always very happy to work together with the Chinese government and people. And I'm very much looking forward to our conversation covering all the aspects of our work. Thank you very much. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for your contribution as co-chairman of my independent expert advisory group on data revolution for Sustainable Development Goals. This data revolution has been making a great contribution to agreeing to Sustainable Development Goals with correct and concise and scientific data. We can really make this world much better.
Yeah, thank you. It's really an honor for me to be a member of that. Last week, when the Chinese internet users learned that you are traveling to China and was willing to answer a few questions from the Baidu postbar users, we started to collect questions from the internet. And within a few days, we got more than 2,000 questions for you, and with a very wide range from climate change to poverty and human rights, all sorts of questions. So I'd like to start to ask you questions on their behalf.
Okay.
As you mentioned, the purpose of your trip is to attend the events to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the end of the World War II and the founding of United Nations. I understand the United Nations mission is about peace, development, and human rights. In terms of war, I think our generation, most of the people today do not have any memory about war. Over the past 70 years, what would you say are the three most important things that the United Nations has done in terms of peacekeeping?
United Nations was founded with the purpose of preventing and saving human beings from the scourge of war. More than 60 million people have been sacrificed during the Second World War.
Yeah.
This is the most atrocious and most tragic war in the history of a human being. So the United Nations Charter it says that this United Nations is now being established to save succeeding generations from scourge of war. Yeah. In that regard, I think we have been trying our best efforts, but we have not been able to fully implement the ideals and principles of United Nations Charter. Looking back 70 years, there is a very significant contribution which United Nations has been made. That is decolonization. Many dozens of new countries got their independence. And this decolonization process also awakened the human being, us, for the importance of human dignity and human rights. Yeah. And that is why immediately after a charter was adopted, then Universal Declaration of Human Rights was declared, adopted. So it has been given basic guidelines how human beings should live with human dignity and right being protected. That is one significant contribution the United Nations has been making. And another contribution is United Nations has been really trying to save many people, lift many people out of abject poverty. In that regard, China has made a significant contribution. When the world leaders adopted Millennium Development Goals, number one target and goal was to eradicate abject poverty. China has lifted the 600 million people out of poverty.
Yeah, we all witnessed that.
And the rate of extreme poverty China was facing until 1990 was more than 60%. Now by 2015 now, you have reduced drastically to just 4% of extreme poverty rate. I'm sure that by the end of 2030, when we finish Sustainable Development Goals, China will be free of this abject poverty. That is why the number one goal of Sustainable Development Goals is to eradicate abject poverty.
So we've enjoyed almost 70 years of peace. And do you think worldwide war is permanently away from us?
We have to do much, much more to save people who are being killed needlessly from these conflicts. Still, at this time, unfortunately, we are seeing many conflicts, regional conflicts. It creates a lot of humanitarian crisis in addition to many people being killed. Look at the case in Syria. We have more than 4 million people who become refugees and being supported in at least 4 neighboring countries. 12 million people are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. Not to mention there's more than 250,000 people who have been killed. And in many African countries at this time, we can name at least 10 regional conflicts at this time. Therefore, United Nations has been deploying 16 peacekeeping missions with 120,000 peacekeepers. I really appreciate the Chinese very strong contribution to peacekeeping operations.
So there's much to be done. And on development, I understand that there's an upcoming announcement on the global goals for sustainable development. And what do you think China can help to promote this? And what would be China's priorities among the 17 goals between 2015 to 2030?
When President Xi Jinping comes to New York to participate in a special summit meeting on Sustainable Development Agenda, the world leaders will adopt this Sustainable Development Agenda with the set of 17 Sustainable Development Goals, starting from eradication of abject poverty and secondly providing nutrition, etc. Then China can provide their experiences through their development policies where they have excelled many other countries in meeting the goals of Millennium Development Goals, starting from lifting many hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And China has also established a very good vision of South-South cooperation. I believe that this South cooperation established by President Xi Jinping can play a very important role in helping many developing countries who in their own efforts to meet the targets of Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, right. And on climate change, what are the biggest challenges today for the world, and what China can do over that? When you come here on the way, you probably saw blue skies and no traffic jam for Beijing, but that's for the celebration period. It comes at a cost. And in your opinion, how do we, developing countries like China, balance the economic development and the environment protection?
Let us think why this climate change phenomenon has been causing all spectrums of our life in a very much dangerous way.
Yeah.
In the name of industrialization, in the name of development, the international community, all the member states have been abusing our privilege to use our nature and natural resources in a very much dangerous way. That is why the world's scientists, more than 2,000 scientists who belong to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is known as IPCC, have made it quite clear in their successive assessment report that climate change has been caused by human behaviors. Therefore, it is only natural that we, the human being, should address. I'm very encouraged that not only government, business communities, and civil societies, they are all aware of this dire situation, deteriorating situation in our environmental conditions, and they are now on board that we must address this climate change as soon as possible. In December in Paris, the member states will gather together to adopt the universal and ambitious climate change agreement. If it is adopted, it will be for the first time that international community has a universal climate change agreement. When I arrived at the Beijing International Airport, my first feeling was that this blue and clear sky, that is the result of a Chinese government very commitment to address this climate change. I understand that from next year, 2016, the all coal-powered power plants will be moved out. That will not be the functioning. That is very good policies, even though it may sound drastic. Sometimes we need to take a drastic measure to address this changing situation. Climate change is coming and approaching much faster than one may think. I highly commend the Chinese government's policies on sustainable development, wisely investing in solar energy. Therefore, it is important that not only China, all the countries of the world should work as one. And I am committed to help member states so that we will be able to have this climate change agreement.
Yeah, that's great. I watched your commencement speech at Georgetown University on the internet, and you mentioned that our generation may be the first generation to end poverty. And to me, I think we are also probably the first generation to be able to enjoy internet. And today, the internet penetration globally is about 42%, which means more than half of the global population still do not have access to internet. And I believe information right is one of the important human rights. From the private sector, for example, for Baidu, our mission is to provide the best and most equitable way for people to find information. And my friend Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, he launched internet.org to help more people to come online. But these efforts are all from the private sector. Do you think on the public side, the public sector, is there anything can be done? What kind of role the UN can play on this?
We are living in an era of phenomenal transformative age, technology, particularly global communication through internet, social media like Baidu, chat. This has tremendously changed our lifestyles, and it also has changed a lot in helping people enjoy their human rights and human dignity, their right, their fundamental right of freedom and knowledge. Therefore, I'm very much grateful to many innovators like yourself, Mr. Robin Lee, who has been really making this world much, much better for all. As you said, more than half of the world's population are still lack to access to this global transformative technology. So all this technology should be shared widely to all the people around the world. United Nations is working very closely with the member states to expand the benefits of this global technology to all the people around the world. When we adopt Sustainable Development Agenda this month, and when they are implemented, then it needs the full support of technological innovation. Right. So I sincerely hope that there will be much more wise investment in technological innovation. Innovation is an answer at this time. As you said, we are the first generation who can put an end to abject poverty, but we may be the last generation who can really put an end to this global environmental phenomenon, climate change phenomenon. That's right. We need to use all this technology of global communication.
So there should be private-public, related partnership to help solve this problem. Secretary General, I understand you care a lot about inequality, the inequality between men and women, the rich and poor. But one kind of inequality I often think about is the language. Because neither your nor my native language is English, but most of the international occasions people communicate in English. When I was young, when I was at college, I spent like a quarter to a third of my time to study English, and I always envy those people who were born in U.S. or U.K. They didn't have to do this, right? Do you think this is an disadvantage to people who live in a non-English environment? They have to spend extra effort to be able to get what they want.
United Nations is a multilateral organization. Thus, we support multilateralism. Multilateralism in language. That is why we have 6 official languages. But other than 6 official languages, there are many languages who are being used around the world. I share your views that there is some inequality in the using foreign languages. That is why I'm asking young people to do their best efforts to acquire more than their own languages, more than the English. It is important that they speak some other languages. learning language is not only a language skill. Through language, one can learn culture and history of the countries where those languages are being spoken. You mentioned this inequality, and that is a very important and very serious issues United Nations is now tackling with the member states. Inequality, injustice, which have been prevalent in some part of the world, has caused a lot of even political instability. When there is a serious gap between men and women, a serious gap in income or resources, then it creates some sources of complaints. And this complaint, when they are not properly addressed, then it festers to even social political instability. That is why addressing inequality, injustice in every aspect of our life is one of very important aspects of UN's policies.
All right. As you know, most of the Baidu postbar users are very young, and I also know that at UN you have a program called Young Professional Program. You have an examination to select young professionals out of that. What is your expectation for and your advice for those young professionals there?
This world is very young, in a sense that more than half of the global population is under the age of 25. Therefore, we have to pay much more attention and invest for the future of our youth. Often the people say that young people are leaders of tomorrow, but a lot of young people have already taken their leadership role today. So we have seen so many young people who are making changes in our daily life. And that is why I made the youth issue as one of my 5 priority issues during my second mandate as the Secretary General of the United Nations. For the first time, I have appointed my envoy of Secretary General on youth. He's just a 30-year-old. When he was appointed, he was a 27-year-old man. He is the youngest but senior most young person in the United Nations. We welcome the young people to join the United Nations. There's a YPP program, Young Professional Program, is a door where we are opening the chances for young people to join the United Nations. And there are many other areas. It's not only public service. The young people can play a very important role. They can be very innovative change makers of this world.
Right. So besides the young people, I understand that next year the UN will see the appointment of a new Secretary General. Do you think this new Secretary General will be a woman? What's your advice to your successor?
I'm now hearing a lot of opinions and voices coming out from not only women society but even men community that next Secretary General would be better to have somebody, woman. During last 70 years, including myself, all the Secretary Generals have been men. I hope that there should be more discussions on this matter. If and when a woman Secretary General would be appointed, that will make a tremendous impact to our current way of doing business. Many people have been talking about gender empowerment, gender equality, only by words. but not much have been made. That is why, as soon as I became Secretary General, I made this gender equality and gender empowerment as one of the #1 priorities. And I really wanted to show my commitment by leading by example. And I have appointed a lot of women to senior positions, Under Secretary General or Assistant Secretary General. They are the top senior rank positions, and I have really changed the landscape of gender issues as far as United Nations is concerned. And I have been reaching out to member states. There have been 10 countries, even 5-6 years ago, where not a single woman was represented at the National Assembly. Now it's being changed. There are just a few countries remaining, and there are 8 countries in the world where not a single woman is in the cabinet. I'm reaching out to those countries, President and Prime Minister, that they should change this. It's an injustice to women and to very capable women resources. So I'm very much committed to do that. And I leave it to member states to discuss who will be my successor.
Great. Yeah, that's great to know. Well, I'm afraid that we are running out of time. I would like to thank you again for spending time out of your busy schedule to answer questions from the Baidu Postbar users. Also, thank you for your tireless effort at the United Nations. And I do wish you the best in the next chapter of your life.
Thank you. 非常感谢.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. 非常感谢.
Yeah, thank you.